watched it happen again and again. People spend years seeking awakening, chanting, sitting, fasting, questioning, breaking their hearts on the altar of truth. Then one day, it happens. The veil lifts. The world collapses into clarity. The self vanishes. There's only presence. And for a moment, perhaps an hour, perhaps a week, they are filled with peace. But then something unexpected happens. Something no one warned them about. The light fades. The peace unravels. And what remains is terrifying. You wouldn't expect this. You wouldn't think that awakening, this sacred word we whisper in temples, could lead to collapse. But it does. All over the world, people touch non-duality and then fall apart. They lose their ability to function. They cry without knowing why. They feel lost, disoriented, sometimes even suicidal. And they begin to ask, was that really awakening, or was it madness? This is not a rare phenomenon. This is not an exception. It is happening in silence, in shadows, in meditation halls and yoga studios, in monasteries and mountain caves. Because we have taught the light, but not the integration. We have glorified the peak, but ignored the descent. And in doing so, we have left a generation of seekers alone in the ruins of themselves. I know this not just from others, but from within. I too have collapsed. I too have tasted that brief extinction of identity, of boundaries, of time and space. And I too have wandered afterward through the rubble, looking for something solid to stand on again. The Buddha spoke of this in whispers. He said the path is steep. He said Mara will return, even after enlightenment. He said the mind must be trained not just to awaken, but to endure awakening. But modern seekers skip the training. They want the insight, the blast, the EgoDeath fireworks. And so, they leap into the sky and have no idea how to land. So let me ask you, what if the real danger isn't not awakening, but awakening too soon? What if the crisis isn't in illusion, but in truth hitting the unprepared? What if the collapse is not proof that it was fake, but proof that it was too real for the structure we had? We must talk about this, not to discourage seekers, not to romanticize suffering, but to tell the whole story, to warn the heart, not a failure, but a fire. Because this is not a game. This is not a psychedelic vacation. This is the total implosion of who you thought you were. And if you're not ready, if your vessel is too small, then truth will not liberate you. It will crush you. No one tells you that light burns. No one tells you that truth doesn't just liberate, it annihilates. They speak of awakening like it's a sunrise, software golden, welcoming. But for many, it is an explosion. It tears through the body, the identity, the dreams you once built your life upon. And when the smoke clears, there's nothing left to hold on to. You thought you were ready. You read the books. You listened to the Dharma talks. You sat in silence for hours, for days. You sought no self. You begged for emptiness. You asked the universe to show you what's real, and it did. But what it showed you was not peace. It was vastness. It was silence so total that even your breath sounded intrusive. It was an unbearable lightness that made the world feel distant, your loved ones like ghosts, your thoughts like echoes in a canyon. This is the shadow of awakening, the part no one posts about on Instagram, the part that doesn't fit in a guided meditation app, because it is terrifying. When the self dissolves, there is no one left to choose, no one left to control, no one left to pretend. You walk through the world, but nothing sticks. Food tastes like cardboard. Music feels like noise. Love feels like a memory from someone else's life. And yet, this is not wrong. This is not failure. This is the purification fire the ancients warned us about. The path of the Arhat, the terrifying stillness of the forest, where the ego dies, but the soul has not yet learned to walk. Where you are free, but too shattered to feel it. I remember lying in bed one night, after a particularly deep meditation, unable to move. Not because I was in pain, but because I didn't know who would move. There was no I left. There was just the awareness of the ceiling, of breath, of space. No desire, no fear, no anchor, only emptiness, watching itself. And in that moment, a thought whispered through the silence. Was this a mistake? Not because I wanted to go back, but because I had no map for what comes after. And that is the heart of it. That is the unspoken tragedy. We have 1,000 teachings to get you to awakening, but almost none to get you through it. So you suffer in silence. You smile at your Sangha, but inside, you're unraveling. You nod at words like liberation, but your heart feels numb. You want to scream, but who would listen? You are awakened now. You are supposed to be free, but it feels like exile. And here's the question that haunts. Did I lose myself? Or did I lose my mind? After the light comes the silence, not the peaceful kind, not the meditative hum you hear in guided sessions, but a silence so vast, so hollow, it echoes. It's the sound of the world continuing without you. The sound of a self that used to be there, now gone. You walk through your life like a shadow of yourself. Your friends speak, but their words feel distant, like someone talking underwater. You go to work, but your role feels like a costume. You sit with family, but love doesn't feel like it used to. It's not that you don't care. It's that you don't know how to care from this new, formless place. No one prepared you for this. They told you awakening would bring joy. They told you it would end suffering. But they didn't tell you that identity was the scaffolding of your entire world. And once it collapses, the world doesn't just feel different. It feels absent. This is not depression. It's not trauma. It's not a spiritual emergency. It is something older, something deeper. The sages of the past called it the void, the desert of the real, the place between selves, where the old has died and the new has not yet been born. It is here that many seekers fall away. Some retreat into distractions. They binge content, search for meaning in noise. Some go back to religion, to roles, to anything that promises a return to structure. And some try to undo the awakening. They grasp for old habits, old identities, old addictions, just to feel real again. But nothing fits. The illusion doesn't stick once it's seen through. You can pretend, but you'll feel it. The hollowness, the knowing, the silent echo of truth behind every smile. You want to rebuild, but with what? There is no blueprint for a selfless life in a world obsessed with self. There is no manual for functioning after the ego dies. And yet, this is where the real work begins. Not in the light, not in the peak, but here, in the rubble. So let me ask you, can you sit in this silence without trying to escape? Can you honor the void as sacred? Can you stay awake even when it doesn't feel good? Because if you can endure the winter of the soul, then something will begin to move. Not fast, not loud, but it will move. And it will not be you. It will be life itself. They don't tell you that after awakening, you have to rebuild everything, not in the old way, not by putting the ego back together, but by learning how to function without one. It's like learning to walk again, but without legs. Like learning to speak, but without a mouth. You are still here, but everything that once held you is gone. You don't wake up enlightened and instantly become a sage. You wake up empty, raw, unfiltered, overwhelmed by a world you now see too clearly. You see the lies, the masks, the absurdity, but you also see the beauty, not in forms, but in being itself. And from this nakedness, you begin to ask, how do I live now? Most people don't know, because the traditions don't say much about after. They point to the mountaintop, but not the valley that follows. But here's the truth. No one dares speak. The ego was a bridge. It got you this far, but it can't take you to the other shore. So now you build a new bridge, not from ideas, but from presence. Not from who you are, but from what is. This is where the deeper practice begins. You learn to eat not to satisfy yourself, but to nourish awareness. You learn to love not to complete yourself, but to dissolve boundaries. You speak not to perform, but to communicate reality as it is, now, with no agenda. Every act becomes sacred, because every act is arising from emptiness. But this isn't poetic, it's exhausting. You will fall back into patterns. You will say I when there is no I. You will argue, doubt, cry, and ache to be normal again. And that's okay, because integration isn't a destination, it's a process. Imagine being reborn into your same life, but as a stranger. That's what it feels like. Same body, same relationships, same history. But now, it's like watching a film you can no longer identify with. You're still in the story, but you know it's a story, and somehow, that knowing changes everything. So how do you live after awakening? You stop trying to be someone, and you start learning how to be, fully, quietly, honestly, without masks, not to escape the world, but to meet it as it truly is. And maybe, just maybe, that's when the real freedom begins. After awakening, you see suffering everywhere, not just in war zones, not just in hospitals, but in everyday moments. The woman staring blankly at her phone on the subway, the man forcing a smile in a meeting he wishes he can leave, the child already learning to hide their emotions just to feel loved. And it breaks you, because now you feel it all. Before, you could look away. You had filters, distractions, justifications. Now, your heart is open, raw, tender, exposed. The boundary between you and them has dissolved. So their pain is your pain. And you start to ask, how can I carry this? How can I survive this much feeling? This is the secret no one tells you. Awakening doesn't numb you. It sensitizes you. It makes you more human, not less. But being fully human in a world built on avoidance is agony. You walk through shopping malls and feel the loneliness beneath the consumerism. You hear laughter and sense the fear it's covering. You hear spiritual words and taste the ego behind them. It's overwhelming. And here comes the paradox. You're more compassionate than ever, but also more isolated. Because how do you explain this to someone who hasn't felt it? How do you tell your friend that you cried watching an ant carry food because it reminded you of human struggle? How do you say, I feel everything now, and it's beautiful, but it hurts? This is when many turn back. Not because awakening was wrong, but because the heart, fully open, feels unbearable. You might wish to go back to who you were before, but that door is gone. So you learn not how to close your heart, but how to hold it. You learn the difference between drowning in compassion and standing inside it. You begin to understand why the Bodhisattva weeps with one eye and smiles with the other. Because the pain of the world is real, but so is its beauty. And slowly, a new kind of strength emerges. Not the strength of distance, but the strength of presence. You learn to sit with the grief without needing to fix it. You learn to witness the suffering without collapsing into it. You become a still point in a storm of sorrow. Not indifferent, but unshaken. And that's when you realize awakening doesn't make you superhuman. It makes you fully human for the first time. When you awaken, really awaken, you want to scream it from the rooftops. You want to tell everyone it's not real. The pain, the chase, the self, it's all a dream. You want to free others like you were freed. You want to give back what you feel was given to you. And the impulse, that deep, sincere urge to help, can be beautiful, but also dangerous, because you're still fragile, still integrating, still breathing in a rhythm that isn't quite steady. And now, the ego, yes, the one that just died, starts whispering again, but this time in spiritual tones. You should teach. You're different now. You have wisdom people need. It's subtle. It sounds compassionate. But underneath it is a craving to be someone again, to matter, to be special, to be seen. And so begins the next trap, the enlightened identity. You start building a new self, the awakened self. You dress like a mystic. You speak in riddles. You quote scriptures. You cultivate presence. But now it's performance. You don't mean to deceive, but without realizing it, you've replaced one mask with another. This is why some of the most eloquent teachers eventually collapse. They were still bleeding while preaching healing, still searching while selling answers. And the spotlight, the followers, the reverence, it all delays the real work, because every applause becomes a reason not to look deeper. Every compliment becomes a chain. So what do you do with the impulse to share? You don't silence it, but you sit with it. You ask, am I sharing from fullness or from emptiness? Am I guiding or still grasping? If the answer is unclear, you wait, because rushing to teach can turn truth into poison, and your sincerity, your real gift, deserves better than that. The world doesn't need more gurus. It needs more honest humans. People who admit they don't have it all figured out. People who've seen the edge and stayed humble. People who awaken and then keep walking, quietly, kindly, truthfully. You may never teach in words, but your being, your presence, will teach without trying. That is the power of one who has truly returned from the fire. After awakening, many fall into another trap, believing they found the only way. The silence, the bliss, the sudden clarity, it convinces you, this is it. This is how it works. This is what everyone needs. And slowly, the infinite becomes narrow. You start to preach presence as the only truth, meditation as the only method, non-duality as the only reality. You don't mean to exclude, but your language begins to harden. You're no longer pointing to the moon. You're selling a telescope. But the Dharma was never a single road. The Buddha himself used hundreds of methods, some contradictory, because different beings need different medicine. To one, he said, there is no self. To another, the self is your illusion. To another still, find the self and see it vanish. None were lies. All were skillful means. So when you awaken, and feel the urge to correct others, pause. Ask yourself, is this about their freedom or my certainty? Am I helping or just validating my experience? Truth is not a fortress. It's a flame. Hold it too tightly and you smother it. This is why many who fall apart after awakening aren't failing. They're being broken by their own certainty. They thought they reached the top, but truth has no top. There is no final view, no final state, no final method. Just this moment, this breath, this ungraspable now. The moment you believe you've mastered truth, it slips away. The moment you cling to the right path, it becomes the wrong one. That's not failure. That's the Dharma still working on you. So what's the real path? The one that dissolves beneath your feet every time you try to walk it. The one that keeps asking, what am I still holding on to? What do I still need to let die? The one that doesn't end with awakening, but begins there. Awakening isn't the summit. It's the shattering of the map. What you do after that is the real journey. After everything, you return to the world quietly. No robes, no titles, no signs that you've arrived. Just a body that breathes, a heart that listens, and eyes that see without seeking. Because the need to be someone, even a spiritual someone, has died. You don't speak of awakening anymore. Not because it didn't happen, but because it no longer matters. What matters is whether you can love the person right in front of you. What matters is whether you can forgive yourself when your old patterns reappear. What matters is whether you show up to life, not as a concept, but as this moment. You still meditate, but not to transcend. You still reflect, but not to perfect. You're not trying to escape the human. You're trying to honor it. And in that honoring, something radical occurs. You stop seeking and start serving. You become the silence in the noise, the calm in the chaos, the one who doesn't offer answers, but presence, the one who doesn't promise salvation, but listens, the one who isn't awakened, but awake. People may never know what you've been through. They might see you as ordinary. But that's the final stage. When truth no longer needs an audience, when light no longer needs a name, when freedom no longer needs to be declared, so you walk, without doctrine, without destination, and the Dharma walks with you, not in books, but in breath, not in words, but in wonder, not in escape, but in embrace. You don't fear falling apart anymore, because now you know. Sometimes falling apart is just another name for waking up.